So for today, it's solving with the quadratic formula. Why is this going to be really easy? Because we just did this over and over again yesterday. And do you get that that's the hardest part of the quadratic formula? B squared minus 4ac is the actual hard part of the quadratic formula. All right. So what we're going to do is just do a couple of those discriminants. And if it comes out negative, do we get to quit? No. But it is imaginary, and therefore it won't have x-intercepts. I think I see a headphone in at least one person's ear. Could you take those out, please? You'll be able to do that during work time. All right, so Alex, can you tell me if I did have a -9 underneath the root, the discriminant's -9, what are you supposed to infer from that?
There's an I.
There will be an I in the answer, yes. But what about the solutions? What would you say about the solutions?
There's no x-intercept.
That's true. And there are solutions that are imaginary. Okay, so the key word is if you get a negative underneath there, the only thing you would be able to say is there aren't solutions unless you count imaginary solutions. All right. So if I said -5 plus or minus the square root of -9 all over 10, would you be able to reverse engineer this and tell me what A, B, and C were? You would, because this right here tells me what B is. And this right here, I can use it. It's not, A isn't 10, but I can tell what A is really easy. And the only hard part is this. There are no real solutions. Or you could say, there are two imaginary solutions. But right now, I'm just asking, what's the equation? Do you guys agree that it must have had an A and a B and a C, and that one of those is super easy? Mr. Long, do you know how to figure out B?
Well, it would just be 5 because
Yep.
x equals -b, which is like, so it'd be like, which is -5.
Yep, so you could say that B, negative B was -5. That's a way to say it. And then, so B has to be 5. Okay, that's pretty easy. Hakan, can you tell me how I can tell A? Really easy.
On the bottom it's 2a, so.
That's really 2A. So couldn't you say 2A equals 10 and then therefore what?
A equals 5.
A equals 5. See how I'm making equations for it? The reason I'm doing that, I know you could kind of like reason it out in your head, but the reason that I'm doing it that way is because you have to have an equation for this part. So what equation could I write? That's equal to B squared minus 4AC. And that seems really complicated until you realize you already know A, and you already know B. And I'm going to rewrite that equation. B squared minus 4AC must be -9. And B is 5. And A is 5, then you can definitely solve for C. Go ahead and do that. Compare your answer with the kid sitting next to you. Now, I could see some kid giving the equation. I get it, because the whole point was to make the equation. But once you find C, stick it in here, and let's all compare the equation with the kid next to you. It's a fraction. That's all right. Okay, compare your answer with the kid next to you.
44 over 20. I got 17 tenths.
Oh, that's what I got.
Yeah.
17/10, what I got. So then I put a 17/10 here, and I've got my equation. All right. So that's probably the hardest thing from yesterday. It's hard to remember sometimes not to square root your answer here, so keep that in mind. This one seems like it doesn't have a b, but it does. Would you please tell me what is the discriminant? And therefore what? Like, if the discriminant is 7, you'd be like, oh, so therefore it's got 2 real answers. And be careful with that real and imaginary thing, because that could really mess you up on this. You might say there's no answers, but then there actually were answers. They were just imaginary. So be careful with how you say your conclusion. I told you that you could probably be smart to learn what those 3 dots mean. Does anybody remember from yesterday? Yes? Nope. The 3 dots means therefore. Therefore, what? So the discriminant in this case was positive. But you can't just say positive. You have to say what it was. Well, first off, you got to know that it's x squared plus 0x minus 16. How many of you already knew that? Cool. Then b squared minus 4ac becomes just sticking numbers in. No big deal. b is 0 minus 4 times a is 1 times c is negative 16. And I'm sure that's the reason it's taking a while to get the final answer, because you got to do 4 times 16. Did you get the discriminant was positive 64? Okay, now some kids are going to be like, there's a negative in there. Yeah, there's 2 negatives in there. There's a negative here and there's a negative there. So it was positive 64. And if you leave it that way, I got to cry and mark it wrong, because you have to say what that means. Alex, how would you say this? 64 and therefore what?
I don't know.
Okay? Your answer should be said something like, there are 2 solutions. There are 1 solution, or there is 1 solution, or there are no real solutions. Given those answer bank, what do you think? Don't know? Okay. So if it's a positive number, underneath that square root, you are going to have 2 solutions. If it's a negative number, you'll have no solutions. And if it's 0, you'll have 1 solution. So this is a positive number, because what's under the root could either be a positive number like 64, it could be a negative number like this, or it could be 0. And this gives you 2 answers, 2 solutions. This gives you no real answers, and this one gives you 1 answer or solution. All right, so there's the reminder of what discriminant means. Would you agree that now that I'm this far into the problem, I've got the thing underneath the square root, isn't it pretty easy to just put it in the rest of the quadratic formula? X equals negative b, but you're far enough along that I'm not going to make you copy that into your notes every single time. We don't need the whole formula. Let's do it in our head. Negative b is actually what in this case? Hello, what's negative b? Negative 0. And what's that? That's just 0. Plus or minus the square root of, do I have to do a lot of work here? No, I already did it. It's 64. All over 2a. And in this problem, what's a?
1.
2 times 1. All right. So now, if you know how to do square roots, this is going to be easy. What is the square root of 64? 8. So you got plus and minus 8 over 2. So that's really plus and minus 4. There's your final answer. Now I know some of you were going to go, I could have done that so much easier by going x plus 4 and x minus 4. Hallelujah, you know that you can factor. That is the easiest way. And I always say, if you can factor it, you should, because then you get the answers super quick. Can you do that today? Yes, but sometimes you already had to do the discriminant. Sometimes it's actually easier to do the quadratic formula than it is to factor, because you've already got the discriminant done. Like, you already had to do all of the hard work to get that, and then the rest of the quadratic formula is pretty easy. All right, go through the notes now. You should be able to simplify these. This is like an R2 level question. The square root of 27 breaks up into 2 square roots. Don't just simplify and go, oh, it's 9 root 3. No, it's not. Break it up into 2 square roots and then simplify it. And the answer is not 9 root 3. It's 3 root 3, because the square root of 9 and the square root of 3 really is 3 root 3. And then you can factor it. And if you can factor it, you should. This part here needs to get factored. And what do they both have in it? When you have a negative on the top, you have a choice. You can either factor out the negative or not. I am okay with either one. I think it's a little easier to not factor it out and just factor out the 3 out of both of them. And this is 2 plus minus root 3. And then I still think of this as factoring. That 9 is 3 times 3. And then if you can factor it, you should. I have, because now things can cancel. There's your final answer. 2 plus and minus the square root of 3 all over 3. And I was amazed at how many kids had trouble putting that as a decimal. I need you to know that, because sometimes the Schoology quiz is going to ask for a decimal, and we could even allow calculators on this next test and then ask you for the decimals. So would you please take a second and everybody get the decimal for this question first? Yes?
Wouldn't it be -2?
Oh, I forgot the negative. Thank you. Good catch. That's a negative, so this should be a negative still. You're right. Good catch. Okay, now use the decimal for this and then get the final answers. Like, you have to do -2 plus that decimal all over 3. And -2 minus the decimal all over 3. And if you get them wrong, it's probably because you're going to forget that this would be wrong. If you type exactly that, your calculator will do it wrong, because it's going to think you just want to divide these two. So I would just hit enter after I got these two done. And then I get the decimal for that. And then I would say divide by 3. Or you can put it in parentheses. Yes, question. Excellent question. Let's go with 3 decimal places. Like, your final answers should have 3 decimal places, like 0.457. All right, I'm going to pause while you find the 2 answers to this. So if you haven't found the square root of 3 yet, I'll be your calculator. It's 1.732. Then you can use the calculator to finish it. Remember, careful with the order of operations. If you don't put parentheses around that, you got to hit enter at least to get the top part done. And then you divide it by 3. And then you got to do it once with the minus. I'm just doing the plus one here because you can't do 2 things at once. So do it once with plus and then once with minus, and then you get your 2 answers. And then compare with the kid next to you. Okay. Let's use the dice of destiny so nobody feels like I'm picking on them for this answer, which is a tough one. It is row 4. Person 2, Amelia, it's you. .089. Can anybody verify 0.089? A lot of nodding heads out there. You're on the right track. What's the other one?
-1.244.
-1.244. Can anybody verify that? Okay, awesome. If you're ever torn on when to round, technically you don't round until you're in the middle of the, until you're at the end of the problem. It can sometimes make a difference. I know, you're like, you said to round to 3 decimal places. Yeah, at the end. In the middle of the problem, get as many decimals as you have. My phone, when I asked it what the square root of 3 was, only told me that, which isn't ideal. You're probably going to have a calculator that'll give you more decimal places. So bottom line, try not to round until you get to the end, and then round it. Okay, those are your 2 answers. Yes?
Why do we need to know what the value of this, of the square root was?
Like why are we getting the decimal for it?
Yeah.
Okay, because for some people, when you look at this answer, which this wasn't wrong, -2 plus and minus the square root of 3 all over 3, it's really hard for people to be like, where the heck would that be on the graph? Like, isn't it kind of hard to think about like where that is on the graph? Whereas if I asked you, where is that on the graph? You'd be like, oh, so they're both negative and one's just like really, really small. And so I guess they'd be like here and here. And I can do it really quick in decimals. But if I look at that, where in the world is that? It's hard to tell. Okay, so it just kind of gives you a better idea of what this actually is. Okay, and it was a parabola that goes like that. Okay, so everybody, x equals -b. Right to it, -9. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. I would not write b squared. I'd write b squared, which is 9 times 9, which is 81. Minus 4ac. I have done so many more quadratics than you have. And I can tell you, this next part right here, everybody knows how to square a number. That's easy. This part right here, and when you put this all together, that's where everybody makes their mistakes. So be really careful on the 4ac. And I put parentheses, because then you can really make sure you don't forget one of the negatives. 4a is 1, c is 10. So I guess there is only one negative, so I will subtract. All over 2a, which is 2 times 1, which is 2. So you really would be nice to yourself to simplify it a little bit before you move on. -9 plus and minus the square root of 81 minus 40, which would be 41. All over 2. Now, a lot of kids are going to get burned on the test because they're going to think, well, I can't simplify this anymore. Have you really, really thought about whether or not you can simplify the square root of 41? Because if you can, then you'd probably be able to cancel something and factor it more, but I don't think there is any square root of 41 simplifying. If it was 42, yep. Or if it was even 40, it would simplify. Because then you could have 4 and 10. But just double check it, because this is going to happen so much. There's some weird ones that do simplify. Like for instance, if that had been the square root of 13, yeah, this would be 42, because it's 13 times 4. Or square root of, oh, what's another one that people miss all the time? 16 times 3. 48. 16 times 3. Anyway, so if you can simplify these, do. But this one is done. It's as simple as it can get. And it's hard to know where that would be on the graph. That's why if you needed to know, you'd probably want to get decimals. And then you could be able to be like, oh, it's here and here. Okay, moving on to this page. Why is this one different? Becca, why is it different?
Because the 4x is on that one side.
Okay, so what do we do? I agree. Add 4x to both sides. Brady, the new equation reads?
X squared plus 4x plus 2.
Now, I have this rule. If you can factor it, you should. But I'll save you some time. This won't factor. So, what do? Quadratic formula. Lou, tell me what to put. X equals?
X equals -4
Keep going. Doing good. Keep going.
plus or minus the square root of 16
Nice.
minus 4 times 1 times 2 all over 2.
all over 2. So most mistakes are done under the root, so we're going to be really careful in here because sometimes you forget a negative or something. So, negative 4 plus and minus square root of 16 minus 8. Yep, that's 8. All over 2. Now, do you remember me saying you have a choice on whether to factor out that negative 1 or not? And I said it's a lot of times easier to not factor out the negative. Just factor out maybe if you can get a 2 to come out. Well, that means I got to start with the square root of 8. Carter-Mueller, what's square root of 8 break into?
4 and 2.
Square root of 4, square root of 2. I like how you started. Then?
Take the square root of 4, so it'd be 2 times square root of
2 root 2. Now this is getting messy. I'm rewriting. And you should too. So tempting to cancel right now. Can I? Nope. Why not? I'm going to remind you, if I had 1 plus 7 over 7, could I cancel the 7s and the answer is just 1? No, it should be 8 sevenths. It's not the same as that. That does not cancel because it's part of an add problem. So you can't cancel those 2's here and here. All right, so instead, you could factor it, and if you can factor it, you should. Do I factor out the negative? No. Two's cancel. Could I leave my answer like that? Yes. Unless they say you have to have a decimal. In which case, you go, I think that's 1.61. Let me check. What is the square root of 2? Nope, 1.41. And I'm not going to make you do it, but you do it negative 2 plus 1.41 and negative 2 minus 1.41. All right. The next one. What if the directions here just said how many answers are there going to be? Patel, do you know what to do then? If it just want to know how many answers are there going to be?
Find the discriminant.
Yes, which is?
And I haven't found
What's the little formula?
square root of.
Not square root of, just the thing under it. It's just b squared minus 4ac. If you didn't know, if you thought you had to take square root, you'd have got it wrong. Just b squared minus 4ac, not the square root of it. Okay, so now we're going to go add 2x to both sides. Now, some of you might have said, but Mr. Server, I want to move everything over from this side over there. You can, but you're going to have a negative x squared in the front. And I'm warning you, negatives in the front of your quadratics are always a pain in the butt. So don't do that. We're going to get these things to go over here. All right. So I'm going to do an unusual thing. I'm going to do a dubstep. A double step. I added 2x plus x squared all at once. Totally legal to do. This cancels this and this cancels that. So it's equal to 0. And I'm going to move that over because I want to leave my b squared minus 4ac there for later. And now I have x squared minus 11x plus 2x plus 14 equals 0. And then there's like terms, x squared minus 9x plus 14 equals 0. Whew, that was a lot of work. Now, side note, every time, just check quick and see, could you factor it? Yes. If you went and did quadratic formula, you did a 16-part formula you didn't have to do. Because, look, it factors. And if you can factor it, you should. X and X, and this one's positive and this one's negative, means it has to be 2 negatives, and then it's a 7 and a 2, and I check it, and it actually works. Negative 7 and a negative 2 makes a negative 9. Sweet. The answers are 2 and 7. And I could see some kids saying, but I got 2 and 7 with the quadratic formula. That's fine. This is just faster. Okay. This one's weird because there's no B. What does that really mean about B? Will Keenan, what's B in this one?
0.
Yep. It's 3x squared plus 0x minus 1 equals 0. I added in this part to make sure I know what A, B, and C are. Madison, tell me how to do the quadratic formula here.
X equals 0, plus minus square root of 9,
B squared is not 9.
0.
0.
Minus 4, 3, and -1.
Notice I put that in parentheses just to make sure I noticed that there was another negative there. All over
2 times 3.
2 times 3, and I'm just going to put 6. There we go. We're close. A 0 plus minus, I can just say plus minus. Square root of negative and negative, 12 all over 6. And if you got that far, I would cry a little bit and have to take off at a minimum 5% on your test. Because it isn't factored all the way. Brady, help me factor the square root of 12.
So you would probably do 3 and 4.
Yep.
Which would mean x equals plus or minus, and then it would just be 2 times the square root of 3.
Perfect. So plus and minus 2 root 3 all over 6. I always say if you can factor it, you should. The 6 factors into 2 times 3. I think it's way easier than trying to reduce other ways. Those 2's cancel because it's times. And times problems you can cancel. Plus and minus square root 3 over 3. I'm having some kids look up the board funny. Did you guys get that? Is that what you got? Some people are saying yes. If you have something else, tell me what you got. I could have done this wrong. Okay. So, if you haven't figured this out yet, it's about using the quadratic formula. I'm going to just remind you the quadratic formula has 3 formulas built in. The red part, which is finding the what? The red part finds you the axis of symmetry, and it helps you find the vertex. And the blue part is the starts with a D. Discriminant, which could either be negative or positive or 0. And the whole thing is also an equation. It's called the quadratic equation or the quadratic formula. And it gets you the x-intercepts of the graph. Even if they're imaginary, then they aren't x-intercepts, but they'd be still considered roots or zeros. Or solutions. Even if there's the B part, the blue part there, even if the blue part was negative, it's still got answers. They're just imaginary. All right, I think you're going to be fine on this. I don't want to do this one. I feel like it's going to be pretty easy. Oh, wait, no, this is the kind where we have to actually make an equation. These are kind of hard. We should do one more of these. Like your answer looks like, well, I figured out that A was 4. It's not. I figured out that B was 7. It's close, but it's not. And then it ends in like a fraction, 1/2 or something. Figure out the equation like that. Hint, I'd always start with A. You can figure out the A super easy, and then you can figure out the B super easy. If anybody's really struggling, just write the quadratic formula next to it. That'll help you make the little equations you need. By now you should have figured out that A is the first part of the equation. And it would be 2. What's B? Say it if you know it. -7 is correct. Because I would set it like this. Negative B is 7. If negative B is 7, you can solve that. Divide both sides by -1 or multiply both sides by -1, and it's -7. And then the only hard part, Mr. Long, how do I set up the formula that does this 65 thing?
Well, first, you know that b equals -7,
Yep.
so that would be 49.
So are you doing b squared minus 4ac
Yeah,
equals
65.
65? Good. And I agree that b is -7, so it goes there. So then that's 49 minus what?
So a equals 2, so it'd be 4 times 2, which is -8, and that would mean c has to equal -2.
All right. 49 minus 8c equals 65. And yes, you could just like think this through and go, what do I want to subtract from 49? I would need a negative number for sure for c. Had to be negative something. But I could just, I think it'd probably be easiest to just subtract 49 from both sides. -8c equals 16. Divide both sides by -8. C equals -2, what you said all along. So then this last one was -2. And there's our equation. A lot of people find that difficult, but who had it before I even said it? All right, there's only like half of you. If you struggled, there's going to be another practice problem on the worksheet. Do it. If you get stuck, bring it up. I'll walk you through it one step at a time. Your homework is a worksheet. Everybody find it. I will look at it with you. You did a Schoology quiz last night, so it is good to kind of shake it up a little bit, do something different. It's in the same folder. I did a unusual 2-day folder here. And it's a Dropbox for HHA 05, solving with quadratic formula homework. The only thing that makes it easy to find is it says assigned November 8th, which is today. So if you open that one, you'll obviously have the right one. And the very first problem is 0 equals 5x squared plus 3x minus 4. Now don't go launch into like factoring it or anything until you know what they want. Use the quadratic formula. Okay, it says use the quadratic formula, so it probably doesn't even factor. And then it does say decimal form. So once again, you'll grab a calculator to get this one done. I'll show you how fast I can do it. Square root of 89 is a bit of a pain. I see why they went with decimals. What is the square root of 89? 9.4339. There's your two answers. You just got to get a calculator to give you the actual final result as a decimal. And it does say to the hundredths, in case you've forgotten what that means. That's tenths. That's the hundredths. I can't spell hundred, apparently. So it'd be like that. That is not the correct answer. It's not 2.47. My point is just 2 decimal places is what hundredths means. All right, now the assignment is a little longish. I think it'd be all right to not have so many, because there's a lot of like just repetition to try to make you, get good at it by force of lots of practice. So let's just cut out number 4 and 5. Skip problems 4 and 5. That should shorten it up. Yes?
If we're not doing number 4, are we still doing number 8?
What do they do about?
Oh, because it says to solve 4 again.
Oh, that's false. So 5. Okay, so 4 and 5. Let's skip different ones instead. Let's skip 3 and 6. Thank you for catching that. Don't skip 4 and 5. Skip 3 and 6. Okay, that's all I got for you for today.